Hey, John Martinez here with the REI Sales Academy, and I want to talk for just a minute about the most important thing your acquisition manager should be doing. If there was just one thing to focus on, one thing to make sure happened every single sales calls, every single one of your sales calls to make sure your acquisition manager was as successful as possible and you are closing as many deals as possible, in other words, turning as many leads into deals as possible, what would that one thing be? Well, that one thing would be eliminating maybes and think it overs. And I'll kind of explain this to you. So, eliminating maybes and think it overs. About an hour ago, I was at lunch with my wife, and what usually happens at lunch is this. We get the menus. My wife looks at the menu and she keeps looking and she can't decide, do I want this or do I want this? Now, I don't have that problem because there's one thing I eat at every restaurant I go to and I always get the same thing, but my wife is a little bit more adventurous. So she looks at everything, she weighs it out, she has a tough time making a decision. Now, luckily, what happens is eventually the waiter or the waitress comes back and maybe they give her more time once, twice, who knows. But at some point in time, like everyone at the table is feeling the pressure that like, hey, it's time to make a decision. And you've probably been in those situations too, where you couldn't decide what you wanted to eat. But after so much time goes by, you're like, well, now's the time to make a decision. I better just hurry up and make it. Here's why this is important. Here's how this relates to acquisitions management and what's most important in eliminating those maybes and think it overs. You see, what the waitress does without even knowing he or she is doing it is forces some type of decision. And when decision is forced, even though it's not a pressured way, right? No waiter or waitress comes up to you and says, you must decide now. They'll give you all the time you want in the world, but just by showing up, they let it known that it's time to make a decision. And when that happens, it forces my wife to get off the fence and just go, okay, I'll make my decision. Usually she goes, John, you order, and by the time you're done, I'll have my decision. And it forces her to weigh out whatever she was gonna weigh out anyways, ask herself whatever questions she was gonna ask herself anyways, and come up with an answer, and then give an answer to that question. What would you like for lunch or for dinner or whatever it is? Now, you can take this and apply it to acquisitions. You see, when you force decision, again, not in a bad way, not in a mean way, not in a pressure-filled or manipulative way, but when you force decision, there's a right way to do it, a very kind, nurturing way. When you force decision, what you do is you take somebody who has a lot on their plate, no pun intended there, thinking about a lot of different options, a lot of pieces to that question of, do I want to sell my house to cash to this person? And you force them to finish that process, that thought process. You force them to come up with an answer. It's the equivalent of saying, John, you order and then I'll make up my decision, right? That's it. The most successful acquisition agents in the country force decision, not in a bad way, in a good way. And I'll explain to you even how to do that. I'll give you the words on how to do that. Here's how to force your motivated seller to pick a menu item. It sounds like this. No, hey Bob, I totally get it. It's a big decision and it's a lot to think about. Listen, after everything we've talked about, why you're thinking about selling, kind of what's going on in your life today with, the repairs and the job and the stress and that type of stuff, everything that we've walked through, if you're not confident right now that this is the way to go after everything we've talked about, that probably tells me that it's just not the right way to go. When I leave here today, I've got other houses to look at and I want to buy one this week. If I buy this one, I might not buy another. And if I buy another, I might not be able to buy this one. So I think what we need to do today is just call it what it is. And if it's not a yes, then it's a no, and that's completely okay. I see a lot of houses and I don't buy every house that I go into. My only job is to make sure you have enough information to come up with a yes or come up with a no with confidence and feel good about that decision. And if you can't feel good about a yes decision, it probably means by default we need to make this thing a no. Now, what does that do? Well, in a very kind, nurturing way, without without putting on the pressure, which only causes people to lie, mislead, or lash out at you. It forces them to make their decision and decide what they're having for lunch. It says now's the time. They feel the pressure, not in a bad way, but it forces them to figure out what's ever holding them back. Now, usually what happens if there's anything left in the deal is they won't let you give them a no. They'll usually say something like, no, listen, I didn't say that. I'm just still a little bit concerned with. I still have a question about. I don't know how I'm gonna tackle. And then from there, you can help them make up their mind. You can give them the information they need. You see, when you force decision in a kind and nurturing way, you eliminate maybes and think it overs. You put out everything on the table that you need to deal with for that decision to actually occur. And if it's not a yes, by default, it's a no. Now, there's other things in play like psychological reactance and the fear of missing out that leads to more yeses there. But if you just remember that the most important job as an acquisition agent is to eliminate maybes and think it overs. And if you get any of them, by default, it's a no. Anything other than a yes is a no. If you do that one thing, more people will just say, well, you know what, it is time, and they'll give you the yes, because it's time for them to make a decision, and they don't want to miss out. Or they'll tell you what's holding them back and say, no, I didn't say that, it's not a no, I'm just still trying to figure this out. And with that information, with you in front of them, you now have what you need to figure things out and help them come up with that yes or no. And guess what? Some of those will be yeses as well. So that's the most important thing your acquisition manager should be doing today.